In the town of Derry Hills, where the pines grow so thick they seem to be trying to throttle the road, there was a place never mentioned in tourist brochures. The locals called it the Field of Abandoned Dolls. It was an old wasteland behind the derelict Blackwood sawmill, hemmed in by marshes where the ground was perpetually sodden and the air tasted of ancient sulfur and rotting leaves. Arthur Murray had known of this place since childhood. The old-timer said the soil there was sour. Nothing edible would grow in it, but if you buried something you loved there, it came back. People didn't like to talk about it, but in every basement in Derry Hills, there was a story about a dead dog that returned home with muddy paws and hollow, vacant eyes. Arthur never believed those tall tales. Not until the day his 7-year-old daughter Lily went to play at the sawmill. The old sawmill was a giant, rusted skeleton dying in the middle of the woods. Workshop number 4 felt like the belly of a metal beast, where shafts of light filled with dancing dust fell through the jagged holes in the roof. For children, it was a playground where the iron felt safe, only because it was old and motionless. That day, Lily was there with her friends, Tommy and Sarah. They were playing King of the Hill.
Look how high I am!
Lily shouted, scrambling onto a metal platform above the main saw shaft. Below her was the abyss of the conveyor belt, choked with sawdust and old grease. Arthur was working in a garage nearby. He heard their laughter, a pure ringing sound he intended to remember for the rest of his life. But suddenly, the laughter turned into a scream. An old, rust-eaten chain, holding a heavy steel counterweight above the platform, snapped. There was a metallic groan, a sound that set teeth on edge. The half-ton weight plummeted like a guillotine. The impact was so violent the entire building shuddered. Ancient mechanisms, dormant for decades, suddenly lurched to life. The platform beneath Lily tilted sharply, and she slid down, straight into the maw of the saw shaft. The most horrific part was that the conveyor belt, under the weight of the fallen steel, began to churn slowly with a sickening crunch. Lily didn't even have time to be afraid. She only gripped the edge of the jagged metal with her tiny fingers. Arthur ran so hard his lungs began to burn, but when he burst into the workshop, silence reigned. There was only the heavy smell of old rust and fresh sawdust, which, before the eyes of the paralyzed children, was slowly soaking up something thick, dark, and hot. At the funeral, he didn't cry. He just stared at the small white coffin and felt a black abyss opening in his soul, one that couldn't be filled with prayers or alcohol. A week after the funeral, Elias, a neighbor who seemed to be 100 years old, came to see Arthur. He smelled of peppermint and damp earth.
"You know where the sawmill is, Arthur,"
the old man said, not meeting his eyes.
"The earth there hates a vacuum. It remembers everything we loved."
"Those are just legends for drunks, Elias," Arthur rasped.
"Legends don't come to your door and scratch at night,"
the old man replied.
"It's not about whether you believe. It's about what you're willing to do to hear her laugh again. But remember, what comes out of that earth brings a piece of the darkness that lives there."
That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He heard Lily's voice in his head. He saw her pink dress, now stained with rust and grease. At 2 a.m, he took a shovel, climbed into his old pickup, and drove to the cemetery. Digging up the coffin was hard. Arthur's hands shook, and the earth felt heavy, as if resisting him. When he finally pulled the small body, wrapped in a blanket from the ground, the sky over Derry Hills turned an unnatural, bruised purple. He brought her to the Field of Abandoned Dolls. The fog here was so thick, it felt alive. It coiled around Arthur's legs, whispering indecipherable things. The ground beneath his shovel squelched like a massive, wet mouth. As he buried his daughter, Arthur felt the chill from the soil seeping into his own bones.
"Come back,"
he whispered.
"Please, just come back."
He waited until morning, but nothing happened. Exhausted and broken, he returned home and fell into a heavy, black sleep. He was woken by a sound, soft, wet, like someone dragging a heavy, sodden rag across the floor. Slap, slap, slap. Arthur froze. His heart hammered in his throat. The sound was coming from the kitchen. Then came the thin, familiar creak of a chair.
Daddy.
The voice sounded like Lily's, but there was something mechanical about it, as if the words were being squeezed through a rusted pipe. Arthur ran into the hallway. She was sitting at the table. His Lily, in the same pink dress, but now it was a dark, muddy brown. Her hair was tangled with roots and dead leaves. She was sitting with her back to him.
Really? God, Lily.
He rushed toward her but stopped a step away. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes weren't brown. They were completely white, filmed over with a thick, milky membrane. A thin trickle of black water, mixed with oil and sawdust, leaked from her mouth.
It was cold there, Daddy. The iron was so heavy. It pressed down on me. I could hear the chains singing underground.
Arthur hugged her. She was ice cold. She didn't smell like flowers. She smelled of stagnant marsh water and machine oil. But he was happy. He was so blinded by his grief that he didn't notice how her fingers, too long, too thin, clutched his shoulder tightly, leaving blue bruises on his skin. Days passed. Arthur tried to live as if everything were back to normal. But Lily wasn't the same. She didn't play with dolls. She sat in the corner of the room for hours, arranging rusted nails into perfect circles. One day, Tommy and Sarah came to visit. They wanted to bring flowers for Arthur, not knowing about her return. When Lily stepped out to meet them, the children froze. Tommy stared at her hand. The fingers were too long, the nails black with peat.
Do you want to play at the sawmill again?
She whispered, and her jaw gave a dry crackle, like an old mechanism.
It's so quiet there now. The conveyor doesn't bite anymore.
The children fled, screaming in terror. Then, animals began to disappear. Arthur found the remains of Elias's dog under the porch. They weren't just torn apart, they were sucked dry to the bone, as if the earth had drunk the life out of them through the little girl. Elias came to him the following night. His face was as pale as chalk.
You did it, Arthur. You opened the door. That isn't Lily. It's just a shell filled with the hunger of that field. You have to take her back before she devours the whole town. She isn't a daughter. She's a lure.
Arthur threw the old man out. He couldn't lose her again, but that same night he woke up to find someone sitting on his chest, cutting off his breath. It was Lily. She was staring at him with those white eyes, and in the dark, they glowed with a faint phosphoric light. She held a kitchen knife, dripping with black marsh sludge.
The earth is hungry, Daddy.
She whispered.
It says you gave me life, so your life belongs to it now. It's a fair trade. The field gives nothing for free.
Arthur tried to push her off, but the little girl was as heavy as a granite slab. Her strength was superhuman, the dead strength of iron and peat. She leaned down to his ear. Her breath smelled of decay and rust.
The real Daddy stayed at the sawmill, crying over my meat, and you're just the door I forgot to close.
A sharp pain pierced his stomach. Then again, Arthur watched as his own blood soaked into the mattress, and he noticed with horror that it was turning black and thick, as if mixing with the oil of the sawmill. Arthur didn't die immediately. He felt Lily dragging his body across the floor like a sack of sawdust. He was semi-conscious when they arrived back at the field of abandoned dolls. The fog parted, revealing hundreds of small mounds, and by every mound stood something, shadows of people and beasts with white eyes. They were waiting for their share. Lily dropped him into a pit.
Now you'll be part of the field, Daddy.
She said, throwing the first handful of damp earth into his face.
Your heart will pump the sap for the roots, and I'm going to town. There's so much love there to share with the earth.
Arthur tried to scream, but the dirt choked his mouth. He watched the small figure in the pink dress walk away, heading toward the lights of Derry Hills. An hour later, the phone rang in Elias's house. The old man picked up the receiver with a trembling hand. A child's laughter drifted from the speaker.
Mr. Elias, it's Lily. Daddy said I could come over. Will you open the door for me? I need to tell you the secret of the sawmill.
Elias looked out the window. A little girl stood on the porch. She was smiling, but in the reflection of the window pane, her image was different. Instead of a child, there stood a tall, rotting skeleton, shrouded in roots and tangled in rusted chains. The old man shuddered, but his hand reached for the lock on its own. The earth was calling, and in Derry Hills, no one could say no to the earth.